Hey everybody, it's Ted Pedromo, and I'm back for Tuesdays with Ted. That's Brian Kurtz helped me make that name up one day. But I'm here with Jule Kim, who I just met, 2 weeks ago in Brian Kurtz's Titans Mastermind group. And welcome.
Thank you so much, Ted. It's so lovely to talk to you. And, I've watched some of your Tuesdays with Ted, and great name. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah. Well, we met 2 weeks ago. You were talking about imposter syndrome in Brian's group, giving an amazing presentation. I've been a member for 4.5 years now, and I've never seen such a reaction from people after and during it. You were just amazing. You've shared so much information.
Well, thank you. I'm still a little bit curious, like what those reactions are, but we don't have to get into that here. it's like, what are people talking about? What are they saying?
We're all imposters, and you called this out and pointed out how we can overcome that.
Yeah, I've actually gotten some really lovely messages after that of people saying it uncovered a few things, and then they were able to actually take it to their counselor or their therapist. So they were able to dig in deeper just from hearing that short presentation. So it's, of course, it makes me feel great that people are finding the advice or the help that they're really needing.
Yeah. And everybody thinks you're moving so fast and everything's changing so fast. When I did a presentation in February 2020, before the pandemic, there was 2 million coaches on LinkedIn, and now there's almost 6 million coaches. Then, how many are really qualified?
That's a great point. I resisted putting coach in my bio on here for the longest time because it just seemed everywhere I turned, there was yet another coach. And it's like at this point now, what does that even mean to people? Does it hold any weight?
No. I don't
I know.
I got certified in 2001 as a coach, a real certification. And people are like, oh, you're a coach. That's so cool. But now it's like you don't want to use the word coach.
No, that's definitely not the reaction I get. And especially not with getting targeted by all the LinkedIn spammers on here. I swear, the day I updated my bio on here to say coach, the amount of spam I receive on here has gone up like 10 times.
Yeah. It's like, buy from me. Like,
oh my gosh.
So how did you get started with imposter syndrome, the whole theme? And
how much time do we have? The short story is that I'm Korean. I grew up in Alabama. And I did not know that that was probably the beginning roots of my imposter syndrome. If you're an immigrant, you may share some of the same background as me, if you're listening. Culturally, a lot of the immigrant mindset around how to succeed in America is that you have to show up better than everybody else. And that was definitely the mindset, like the values that my dad instilled in me. So it wasn't enough to be better. You had to be 5 times better to prove that you belonged here. And that's a lot of pressure when you think about it. So just from the earliest days, having my dad's voice in my head saying, you have to show up and be the best all the time. And if you're not the best, then you failed. And you can't ever ask for help from anybody. So these voices, they start to build, they start to shape your personality. And so this is why I got into it is, fast forward, I don't know how many years later, like 35 years, I was 35 years old. I left my job at Amazon to go start my photography business. Still did not know what imposter syndrome was. I'm not exaggerating when I say it's like imposter syndrome hit me like a truck. So I spent 2 years making no money because you go from like a technical field, you go from what you're comfortable with, and you go into that outside your comfort zone area, and that's where imposter syndrome tends to really strike hard. So that was it. That's why I do the work I do today, is seeing other women do similar things where they turn down opportunities. They're hiding, like the photo, like the story I shared with you. Yeah. There is this element of hidingness, is like trying to not be exposed. But when you do that, you are holding yourself back from all the opportunities that are really out there for you. You're holding yourself back from your growth. You're not getting that promotion. You're not getting the titles. You're not getting the recognition.
Yeah. When I switched careers in 2001 after 20 years in the tech world, I became a certified coach. And I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. And I had imposter syndrome. I didn't realize it till your presentation actually the other day.
Oh my goodness.
And
So
I
do
didn't
you
get
remember?
clients for like a couple of years. And I was like, I got to learn how to market. I got to learn how to sell. I got to learn how to do all this. And finally figured it all out. But at first it was like I was a techie that didn't want to talk to anybody. And all of a sudden I'm trying to get clients as coaching clients.
Kind of hard if you
Yeah,
think of yourself as not wanting to talk to people.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I kind of see the same thing on LinkedIn as people are all shifting careers now. I mean, you just don't get a job and work 40 years and retire because there's so many careers and so many changes. And I see people on LinkedIn and some people never post. Like I spoke at one event and this guy said, I've been on LinkedIn for 10 years and I never got a client. I said, how often do you like this? Oh, 2 or 3 times a year. Like, okay.
Yeah, it kind of brings to mind the saying, closed mouth doesn't get fed. It's like, how do you expect people to know about you if you never show up? That's like saying people at the party should know about you when you didn't come to the party.
Right. But yeah, people are afraid to share on LinkedIn from my experience. Like they feel like they're going to get called out or somebody's going to comment and you're not going to be able to answer the comment correctly or something. I don't know.
Ooh, so I think that's not just LinkedIn, it's on all social media, like that last bit that you shared. So I have a pretty decent following. I mean, I'm not like a huge influencer, okay? But I've got around 20,000 followers on Instagram and I don't know, 29 on TikTok. You go through this journey, like you realize there are going to be people out there who just they're going to be jerks. They just want to be jerks
Yeah.
that day. And it's not even about you, it's about them. But there's this idea. I think one of the hidden fears for people who are holding back is they're like, how do I deal with that? People are going to think things about me and they're going to judge me. And I was like, that's a given. You realize the people you know in everyday life, they're already doing that. It's not really any different from social media.
Yeah.
It's just that on social, people have the balls to feel like they can say these things online where they would never say that to your face.
Right. Some people would say it to your face, but not many.
True. True. Maybe Brian is one of those.
No, but it's true. You're afraid to put your expertise out there, even though you are a real expert, because you're afraid of those trolls that are going to come after you. And then it compounds.
Oh, yes. It's like what you said earlier. What if they ask a question I can't answer? So what? Okay. And then what do you think is going to happen?
Right.
Or even updating your career change on LinkedIn. People won't do that either
Right.
for the same reason. What are people going to think? And
Mhm.
I did the same thing. Like I had such a hard time because in my mind I was like, okay, I've been product manager at Amazon. To me, that seemed prestigious, right? Like it holds status.
Yeah.
And then for me to then update to photographer, self-employed, and then what, 5 years later, update to coach, again, self-employed, I felt like people were going to think I was crazy. Like I don't know my own mind. And that's something people have actually said to me. So it just made that fear worse.
That's interesting because no career goes 40 years anymore. We get laid off, jobs end, companies get acquired. I've seen so many of my friends. I've been through 3 career resets in the last 20 years. And it wasn't my choosing. I loved what I was doing, but it ended with the dot-com crash. So I just had to reinvent myself. In 2008, had another setback and then got a job. We were doing great. And they laid us all off because got an agency came in. So I was like, it's frustrating. But
Yeah.
I'm starting over again, imposter again. I got to learn something all new.
Ooh, the starting over again. That's something I've heard so much. You probably hear it too. People hate the idea of starting over.
Especially when you're 52 and you've had a great career, but you've been on a roller coaster for a while. And oh, now I got to learn a whole new career again.
Yes. So the older you are, the more that plays into this, especially for the imposter syndrome. So I don't know if you remember me saying this in the presentation, but imposter syndrome especially tends to rear its head when you are entering a space where you're very different from the other people. So whether you're a woman going to an all-male team, or you may be a little bit older than the rest of the people who are in the field, and so that's the area where the starting over tends to really kick in and make people nervous or uncomfortable. They just feel like they're behind. So that's a statement I hear all the time. Like, what's some stuff that you've heard people say?
Well, I kind of went through it myself when I got a job at 52 as an online marketing manager for a software company. I show up to work and everybody there that works is like my children's age, mid 20s. And for the longest time, I'd have questions. I just ask them questions and they wouldn't answer them. They'd say, oh, look it up. Look it up on the intranet. They wouldn't help me for like the first month. I had to really earn their trust.
Oh my goodness. I mean,
Yeah.
if I were at that company, I would not have said that to you. I feel like that's kind of mean. But man, that's a level I haven't even thought of.
Yeah. And if the intranet was out of date, so everything I'd look up on how to work the system, our configuration was totally different and none of it ever worked. And like, can you just show me? It'll take you 2 seconds to just show me what to do. And they wouldn't.
Of course.
But then eventually I earned their trust and got over that imposter syndrome. And they said, he really knows what he's doing.
Oh my goodness. Well, good for you, because I don't think the resources were as widely available back then, around imposter syndrome. Like, to me, it feels like a relatively recent word to hit the mainstream. And even now, like, I still meet probably more than half the people out there who don't know the experience. And even though they've had experiences just like yours, where they were treated like they didn't belong, they weren't helped just because they were different,
Yeah.
they still don't have the label to put on that experience. I feel like most people who are over 50 generally are like, you just got to pay your dues. They just kind of lump it in that category.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're starting over in a career that you weren't in a while back. It's like, well, how could you know that? I had people reach out to me once on LinkedIn. He said, I was a Amazon SEO expert and my book was just coming out. I said, oh, I'd love to talk to you about your services. I have a brand new book coming out. I'd love to hire you to do the SEO. And he sent me this death threat. He goes, you're too old. You know nothing about marketing and you know nothing about the internet. I grew up on the internet. You grew up with wooden swords.
Oh my God.
I'm like, oh my God, this guy's crazy. And I wanted to have a call with him to maybe hire him. And he literally like, oh, he told me this story about the, oh my God, it's crazy. I unfollowed him right away. It's like, I don't want any part of this crazy guy.
Yeah. My goodness. Well, here's hoping that this gets back to him and he sees that he lost a potential sale. It's very strange.
So maybe you could share some of the things you shared in the presentation with Brian's group. Maybe you gave some really good advice and good tips and kind of helped us label it kind of where we might be at what stage.
Yes, I would love to. So there's imposter syndrome, but I think I wanted to talk about imposter syndrome and LinkedIn as well. So how this shows up. So I'll share some general stuff and then we'll talk about maybe how this affects people for actually coming on LinkedIn or the fact that they're not coming on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So number one, if the imposter syndrome term is new to you, I've noticed that there are several reactions around this. One, it'll be you're in the category that I was in where you felt a lot of relief. You have been feeling this way for a long time, secretly inside your heart or your mind, that you're a fraud, that you don't actually belong in this field, but you really want people to not discover that you don't belong, right? Because then you're going to feel exposed. And one layer deeper is this idea that if they do find out, you're going to be kicked out. You're going to be carted off. And this is something that even the most famous, most accomplished people have experienced. So I think Kate Winslet was saying that she was expecting people to like take back her Oscars or cart her off the campus of wherever she was staying. It's, really famous people who are accomplished. Like we all feel this. But the strange thing is that it's a very isolating experience because we feel so ashamed over it. We're not talking about it to other people. So
Right.
we think we're the only ones who feel this way, which is completely not true.
Yeah. I totally see that with people.
Yeah. So more than 70% of the people out there in studies will say they've felt imposter syndrome at least a handful of times in their life. And so it's a spectrum. You'll have some people on one end where it crops up just every once in a while, especially when there's a major transition like what you experienced, having to start over into a new career. Or for some people, it can be like you're moving to a new country, a new culture,
Mm.
where you are literally different physically, background, culturally, in many, many different ways. So there's people like that where I would say you got off a little bit easier. And then there are people who experience it a lot more frequently, like myself. So even joining Brian's group, Titans,
Yeah.
I had this moment where I almost don't want to share this because I'm like, I don't want to jog Brian's memory of the emails I sent him before I joined the group. But there was a part of me that was envisioning the group to be just filled with these like rock star marketers. And do I actually deserve to be in a group like this? So I remember messaging Brian. I was like, I'm a coach and I only make this amount of money a year. Is this really the right group for me? And he replies, it's like, well, I actually think you're the perfect kind of person to come into this group. So
Right.
it can be anything. Anything can trigger those feelings that you're not as smart or as talented as other people think you are, that you're going to be found out. And the reason why you have this fear is because you probably have this history of always downplaying compliments, of refusing to accept your successes. So, for instance, if I tell you, Ted, wow, gosh, you're amazing. America's LinkedIn coach. You have over 20,000 followers. That's amazing. And how would you respond to that?
At first, I felt like an imposter because I never wrote a book before. So I had to write a book about LinkedIn. Now I had 600 connections. So I'm like, how did I get this book deal? I only have 600 connections.
I hear that one a lot. So many people. So people who call themselves LinkedIn coaches or Instagram coaches, TikTok coaches, and they have this expectation that they should appear more credible in some way. So the only 600 connections is pretty key. And then you went off and wrote a book on it. I had a similar experience with me. I wrote an affirmation deck. So these are affirmation cards around self love. When the publisher approached me for it, I had a huge meltdown. So again, it was imposter syndrome. It was this idea that I'm a coach, but I'm not that kind of coach. And people are going to find out that I'm a lot meaner than they expect coaches to be, especially for someone who's written affirmation cards about self love.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent days like it was this incredible like back and forth, this my identity, questioning myself. Um, am I even legit to do this?
Right.
Like, will people feel like, oh, this is garbage? She has no business writing this. Like, what is she doing? So, all of these kind of thoughts going through my head. And these are a lot of thoughts that people experience when they come on social.
Yeah.
Now, what I find different about LinkedIn is the layer of it's a very professional place, is what's usually sort of cycling through people's heads.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say LinkedIn is so professional, like what does that mean in your experience?
My friend Alex Mondosian actually explained it really well. He said LinkedIn is kind of like a library. You're polite and you don't want to make noise and disrupt anything. But the same person goes to Facebook, they let their hair down, and it's like a party. Literally in the same minute.
Yes. Yes, that is so true. So there are so many people who still adhere to that idea. Whereas today, when I come on LinkedIn and I look through my feed, I see amazing people like Leah. I can't, is it Leah Turner? I see tons of people like Leah or Laura Acosta who
Yeah.
have no problems being vulnerable, who keep it real, but it's still within the bounds of being appropriate. And
Right.
I think that's the secret fear is when people are saying LinkedIn and professional, they are worried that they're somehow going to be inappropriate and then will scare off their potential job opportunities in the future.
Mm,
Maybe they won't get hired, or even worse, maybe they'll be fired because of something they posted.
right. I've seen that happen.
Yeah. And then when you tie this back to imposter syndrome, there's this idea that you may write something that someone out there might see, and then they'll then discover, oh, she's not that smart after all.
Right.
And then this is where you start going down that spiral. So, in a nutshell, if you are sitting here, you're listening to us, and you think any part of you, you hesitate on coming onto LinkedIn to write something. Your thoughts may be, who am I to write about this? I've only got 500 connections.
Right.
What are some other things people say?
A lot of people, they just don't post. They just lurk. They read a lot of, they never comment. They never post any content. They just lurk. And all of a sudden they'll have an opinion about something like, where'd you come out of the blue? You haven't been contributing to this conversation. And then all of a sudden you jump in and disrupt it.
Uh, yes. So I have this thing. I should probably make a video on this sometime. But that reaction, I sort of call it when you're learning to find your place. It's sort of like you're learning to drive. So
Yeah.
for a while, you're not even in the driver, like in the street, you're driving on the shoulder. So these are the lurkers.
Yeah.
And then they suddenly decide to show up. They have an opinion. And they've probably started typing something out and have like backspace, like deleted dozens of times. But when
Right.
they finally think, okay, this is it, I'm going to say it, it's like they've decided to drive into traffic, but instead of driving in their lane, they're now heading into oncoming traffic.
Right.
So they're not yet like discovered where their place is, like what makes sense for them, for their brand.
Right.
And this is some of the work you would want to do. If you're feeling imposter syndrome and you haven't been showing up the way that you really want to, it's to learn to deal with that discomfort. Okay.
Yeah.
You have to learn to figure out you're not going to die. So
Yeah.
again, ask yourself, if you post this or you are afraid to post this, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. So you kind of have like anything, you just got to get out there and start doing it and you get better over time. But if you don't do it, if you don't practice, you're never going to get better.
Yeah. You've probably seen some of these posts floating around out there where it says your first podcast is going to suck.
Yeah.
You know, your first video is going to suck, but you can't get to your 50th without making your first. So go out and do it. And it's the same concept.
Yeah.
But for some people, that layer of wanting to protect themselves is really strong.
Mhm.
So maybe think about lowering your protection because, again, you're not going to die.
Right.
And something that I've told a lot of people, which you probably have too, is if at the end of the day you find that you've written something that is really just not right for you, you feel really terrible about it, you can delete it.
Right.
Yeah, you
Exactly.
you can delete it.
And
Um,
the chances of people seeing like your first video or your first article are pretty slim.
I mean, uh, yes. So it's sort of like, okay, one, if you've barely shown up anywhere, then yeah, you're probably not going to get a lot of eyeballs on it. But then two, if you actually get into the groove of making content, then people would have to scroll back pretty far to get to that earlier stage of content.
Right.
Yeah, so get to it, right? Like just make a bunch of content and you'll eventually get good at this and people won't even see that other stuff.
Yeah. It's like my LinkedIn articles. I have almost, I think, over 300 now, maybe close to 400.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I didn't write any for years. And then all of a sudden I just got into the rhythm of writing 3 or 4 a week, sometimes 5 a week. I take my emails that I was writing, turn them into articles. And now it's like, oh, I got a lot of content there. I've got a lot of history. And I read back some of the first ones. It's like, wow, those are horrible. Like
Oh my gosh.
how-to tips, click here, click there. Like, oh my God, no wonder nobody read these.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you actually make yourself go and start posting these to LinkedIn?
I just started writing more emails. Actually, I met Laura Belgray about 5 years ago and kind of just followed her style of just put it out there. Don't put boring stuff out there. Be yourself, be authentic, be vulnerable. And those are the ones that people reply to and engage with. They don't want to just know how-to tips, the boring blah, 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 or the headshot videos. I have trouble doing those for myself. Because I don't want to be one of those guys who's just like ranting and preaching. I just want to share good information with people.
Yeah, and have a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the part you said about being authentic and like not being boring. But I think by nature, if you are just authentic. So I watched one of your earlier episodes with, is her name Liana?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can tell that she's just so thrilled about the AI space and ads. You can tell she just cares so much about it. Like that was one of the best episodes I've seen in a while.
Yeah.
And like just be genuine, like be natural and be genuine. And I think that's one of the fears is what you said that that guy said about how people view LinkedIn is like you have to be polite and kind of tucked in, like
Right.
gotta have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Is like that's not really what people want anymore. Like we've moved beyond that stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Barry says an old mentor, Spike Humor, told me, as long as you're trying to do right, there's no wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just so much. You can go so far with this imposter syndrome and why people act the way they do. And so let me ask you a question about certifications. You're a PCC, which is a very high level certification. Did you feel you needed that before you could go out and coach people?
I wish I could say no, but honestly, the truth is it was more yes. So, there are 5 main types of imposter syndrome as defined by Dr. Valerie Young, who I had the pleasure of studying with. One of the imposter syndrome types is called the expert type. And this is the person where if you resonate with what I'm sharing here, this is the person who feels they have to have all the certifications, all the classes, all the credentials before they can go out and do something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I knew that I had already gone through imposter syndrome through photography, having my photography business. So when I started coaching, as soon as I got enrolled into the coaching program, I told myself, you're not doing that again. You're not. So I immediately started marketing myself as a coach and started getting clients. So I would probably say I'm one of the fewer, like the minority percentage in coaching training program who already had clients, even as I was learning how to coach.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't charge anywhere near as much as I charge today because I recognize probably not the most skilled, but I did go out and get clients. But at the same time, the actions did not align with how I truly felt inside, which was you're not a real coach. You don't know what you're doing. People are going to find out and they're going to want a refund. So that's how it showed up for me.
That's
So
exactly what I went through when I got learning coaching. I went through all the classes. Then there's a 9-month certification after that. So I need the certification for credibility. Otherwise,
yes,
people aren't going to hire me.
yes, the credibility. And do you know, out of like the hundreds of people I've worked with, only 2 people have ever asked me about certification. Like
Yeah.
literally just 2. Like people don't even know that there's really a certification for this. They just want you to help them.
Right.
And so same thing, showing up on LinkedIn, they don't care about your certifications. They just care, is there anything valuable in your post that
Right.
I can learn from? And is there anything about you that will make me think that you and I are cut from the same cloth?
Yeah.
Because then that means you understand me. So, in order to get to the point of someone hiring you, the person first has to feel like you understand them. And if you are never showing up on LinkedIn, then you're not doing that part
Right.
because you're this black box, this enigma. People don't know anything about you because you're never posting, you're never commenting, you're never engaging.
Yeah.
So then ask yourself, how do people know anything about you if you're not sharing anything?
Right. See, I find you got to share your expertise, be vulnerable is a huge one for me because they connect with you. Say, I'm not perfect. I failed. Here's how I failed, and here's how I fixed it. I worked through it, or whatever. You just otherwise, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes.
Yeah, and perfect is not only not relatable, it's a turnoff. I think we've progressed through the stages of our culture and how we identify with social media is we're at this stage of wanting more realness. And I think that's why TikTok is so big because so much of the videos that really go viral on TikTok, they're unpolished, they're unfiltered, but the people are just sharing from this very genuine energy. So definitely not like YouTube.
Right. The perfectly scripted videos with the background that's perfect.
Yeah, with the lighting and all the gorgeous hair and makeup and all of that. No, like
Yeah.
that's not what TikTok is. And I think we're starting to see the shift across all the platforms now in the same direction.
Yeah. That's what people want. It's entertaining.
Yeah.
This has been good. We're kind of running out of time, but gosh, we could talk forever. Let's do this again and continue this conversation.
I would love to. So thank you again for inviting me on here.
So how can people get in touch with you?
Well, of course, on LinkedIn, since we're on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me with a message on LinkedIn or just email me hello@adviceactually.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Jule. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you, Ted.